Hi, this is Fred Green with Golf Smarter Mulligans and the fifth in our spring into golf season with the late Tony Manzoni. We recently talked with Tony about his relationship with Frank Sinatra, but what he didn't mention was that Frank was the godfather to Tony's daughter. Yeah, that close to Frank Sinatra. To learn more about Tony and our tax-deductible fund created in his memory to benefit the First Tee of Coachella Valley, please go to golfsmarter.com/Tony. Tony's book, The Lost Fundamental, One Simple Move, Better Golf Forever, is available on Amazon in paperback or for the Kindle. And his DVD of the same name can only be seen online through our private channel. To gain access, please write to me directly via email, golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com, or click on the Hey Fred button at golfsmarter.com.
Welcome to Golf Smarter Mulligans, your second chance to gain insight and advice from the best instructors featured on the Golf Smarter podcast. Great golf instruction never gets old. Our interview library features hundreds of hours of game improvement conversations like this that are no longer available in any podcast app.
But you should be able to take a pitching wedge out and hit it 50, 60, 70, 80. Now, you should be able to hit it all those distances. That's called shot making. The great players like Hogan, he would hit every club in the bag during a practice round 25 times, and he'd hit them different trajectories. Left to right, right to left, high and low. And he could stand out there and with his whole set of clubs and hit a green about 150, 160 with every club in the bag, including the driver. So he had the ability to speed it up or slow it down and still make a legitimate swing and hit the ball flush. That's what's missing today. If a person would take the clubs that they have and practice with them and use them for different distances, you'd be surprised. They could literally eliminate some of the clubs in their bag and still be able to play without any problem.
With another interview from the archives of Golf Smarter, here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome back to the Golf Smarter podcast, Tony.
Great to be back.
It's good to have you again. Thank you for, even though it's been a week since we've recorded our last one, usually when we do two-part episodes, we'll record one right after the other, but you had to go, so it's great that we can just go ahead and pick this up. Before we started recording a moment ago, we were talking about our excitement that the NBA Finals is beginning tonight. Now, I know when people listen to this, it's going to be old news, so I don't want to talk about the teams and their chances and what's going to happen, but, you know, there's something about the Warriors that is so interesting, that there are two players, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, who are all-stars and Steph's a superstar, but they both grew up in an NBA arena, right? Both of their fathers played in the NBA.
Right.
And then you think about players like Ken Griffey Jr., who grew up in a major league dugout because his dad played in the majors. And there's, other baseball players as well. What kind of impact, or do you know of players on the PGA Tour whose fathers were also players on the PGA Tour, and what kind of impact did it have on them in their play?
Well, in some cases, if the dads were great, let's say like Nicholas, it's very difficult for the sons to they go in there with an anchor because they've got to beat a record that's already been established. So that's the downside. The upside to it a lot of times is that because their dads were involved in a sport, whether it's baseball or whatever, they have a better comfort zone there, and they have a better understanding of what's going to happen because they've been around it, all their youth. So, it's kind of a two-pronged thing there. One is a little bit tough on you, and the other one makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I could see how that. But if in fact you do pursue the same line that your dad did, it's like a lot of kids I can see just going, yeah, I want nothing to do with that because there's, I can't match up to him, and I don't care.
Well, it's true. I mean, I was lucky enough to know Frank Sinatra a bit, and his son was a tremendous singer, but how are you going to stand up to Frank?
Yeah, it always seemed like Frank Jr. was a junior. He always just seemed like a bad copy of Frank trying to do Frank. He never seemed like, at least I never knew him, and just what I saw of him on television, that he was just trying to do Frank, and it just wasn't working.
Well, the truth be known, his speaking voice was exactly like Frank, so
Wow.
his singing voice was going to be similar. He didn't have the pizzazz and the aura that Frank presented,
Sure.
and he didn't really have the chops that Frank had either. But he sounded like his dad. I remember when I was involved in the celebrity event that Barbara Sinatra put on for abused children. And one year, Frank Jr. did the show. This was after his dad had passed. And it was eerie. I mean, you would think it was Frank Sinatra on stage until you saw him. And then the way he handled him. So he had very unique the ways about him when he sang. He did some really cool things. But his dad had, when Frank got on the stage, I don't care who was up there previous, he just owned the thing. He just had that. He just had that it thing. That's it. Plus, he could sing his butt off.
And then talking about Wayward Sons, I have to do it. Any comments about Tiger?
I don't know the details. I do understand that you should be, you can't mix prescription drugs.
Right.
But a bigger question is, you're worth $750 million. What are you driving from Northern Cal to Southern Cal by yourself? Number one, why not have a driver?
Why wasn't he in Florida?
Or he was going. I mean, it was a long drive. He was going to Florida or someplace.
Yeah, he said he was going home and he was going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, and when you look at the videos that they're showing, it's very incriminating. But I know of people that have had really bad reactions to drugs that are mixed. So I think the jury is still out, but a lot of people like to make a big deal out of it and make him look like a bad guy. He's got a lot of people that don't like him.
Sure.
And that kind of comes with the territory of being famous.
But I think there's also a lot of people who are going, oh, that's so sad. Oh.
Sure, I think there's a lot of people feel bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, with Tiger, at one time he could have run for president.
Yeah.
And then after...
Well, he came onto the scene. He kind of exploded onto the global stage at the same time as Barack Obama, right? I mean, a little bit earlier, but at 2008, he was at his pinnacle, and here comes Barack Obama, and anywhere in the world, it was kind of a debate on who was the most recognizable person in the world at that moment. Was it Tiger or was it Barack Obama?
Yeah, I think I would have voted for Tiger, to be honest with you. He was, he was bigger than life there for a while, and unfortunately, because of his escapades, he lost favor with everyone for a bit of time, and then little by little, people start creeping back into his camp, including sponsors. But there for a while, he was very disliked because he had this perfect marriage, kids, the whole thing, and then he dumps it for doing stupid things.
Yeah. Yeah. My greatest fear in all of this, that, with all the surgeries that he's had, and he's had multiple back surgeries, and if you've been following the Warriors, you know about Steve Kerr, and he's now regrets the surgeries that he had. He says you should never do back surgery, and Tiger's now had 4. My greatest fear is that he's addicted to pain meds.
That's a very good possibility. Yeah. Very good possibility.
Sure.
Like you said, he's had so many operations. And I go back to, I met Tiger a long time ago at a tournament, a celebrity tournament. He just happened to be there because there's a lot of celebrities there.
Was he a pro at this point? Was he still a pro? Was he already a pro at this point, or was he still before that?
No, it was before that. And the first thing I noticed that he was very small-boned for a guy that hit it so far. He was out of college, and he could bench press 300 pounds when he weighed 150. So he was a real strong guy, and he could run really fast too. But I noticed that he had his hands are medium-sized, but his wrists were very small. And so his tendons and everything were built for that kind of a frame. And then he started doing all the weight training and heavy weight training and got very big, and it's still big, really. And I think that you can put on a lot of muscle, but your structure is built for a certain body type. And I think that's where a lot of his injuries came from. Is just that he got so heavy muscled. And I don't think his tendons could hold up, his knees and so forth, the back, everything kind of fell apart. Because I did a tournament years ago called Kids for Kids, and I had Justin Leonard and Tiger. Tiger just hit the drive on one of the holes with like a pro-am to raise money for children that couldn't afford to play golf and so forth. And I remember I was a fairly long hitter at that time, and I got up on the hole where it was a long drive contest, and I really cracked one. I was thinking, man, nobody's catching that one. And I got out there, and I saw this little flag about 40 yards ahead of my ball. I says, well, what the heck is that? He says, oh, that's where that 16-year-old kid hit it. And I mean, Tiger must weigh, he looked like he weighed about 50 pounds when he was there, just skinnier than heck. But, boy, he could just move the ball. And I think he hit it farther as an amateur than he did as a pro.
Really?
And he was skinny. He was not, big muscled people don't hit it long. Davis Love is a perfect example of a long, lean guy that hit it long, even in his later years. So I think he's mistaken. I'm afraid that Rory McIlroy's done the same thing. He got into really heavy weight training. Way back when there was a guy by the name of Frank Stranahan, he was the first bodybuilder golfer, and I just don't think that the two match. I don't think they go together.
And then, like Jose Canseco was like the first big weightlifter for baseball, and then the accusation of steroids, and then everybody else, and then he came out and said, and what's so interesting is he came out and said he was going to do this book that everybody's doing steroids, and everyone's like chastised him and berated him and pretty much blackballed him from the world of baseball. And now, that many years later, he was right. All along, he was the one that was right.
You can't blame athletes for trying to get an edge when everybody else is doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
And no one's ever been definitive about steroids and things like that, what they can and cannot do. And if you don't abuse them, doctors prescribe them, for God's sake. So, but the problem is that when you get into weight training and you get into, okay, my arms are this big, I want to get them bigger and I want to do this, you're in that arena where that stuff is bandied about. And that's when it's, I think it's like something that is like a drug almost. You want to get bigger, you want to get stronger. You get in the gym, you're bench pressing so much, you want to press more. And that stuff is available, and it kind of calls out to you, and that's when the mistakes start happening. You start injecting stuff and doing more of it than you should, and then you pay the piper. Yeah. That's why you see so many football players dying so early. I really attribute it to a lot of that kind of stuff.
The steroids and the pain medication.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you OD on that stuff, or when you do it too much in your system, it eventually catches up with you.
Sure. All right, way off topic. Sorry about that. Let's get back to what our conversation started to be last week. I wanted to continue this week because you gave so much really valuable information. And what we're talking about is taking your game to the next level, one club at a time. And we're dissecting each of the clubs in our bag to see what we can do to improve our game and improve our ball striking and lower our scores by focusing on practicing with each club and what we can do. Last week we talked about the putter, the 8-iron, chipping with an 8-iron, and the lob wedge, and the sand wedge, and then how a ball releases when you're chipping, and how much it releases. So if you missed that, you got to go back to hear that. But let's talk now. Let's start again here. Let's start at the sand wedge. We really didn't cover much of it. Tell me what I need to do better with my sand wedge that I'm not doing that's going to get the ball closer to the hole.
Well, the sand wedge is a marvelous club. Gene Sarazen was the one that invented the thing, and It's been primarily used for bunker shots and shots in and around the green and hitting flop shots. But then with the advent of higher lofted clubs being made with lob wedge and so forth, in my estimation, and this is just my opinion, and maybe I'm just a little old school because I am old. I like to hit all kinds of shots with the sand wedge. I don't even carry I put a 60-degree in, and it befuddled me because I couldn't get the distance control that I wanted. I expected more distance, and I came up short with a lot of shots. So I've gone back to the sand wedge. I've taken a little bounce off of it so I can use it in the fairways, and I can open it up and hit that lob shot. And really, that's what you should do. When I was with Callaway and I got to know T.T. Rodriguez a little bit and listen to him, he had about 20 shots with the wedge. He could just do anything with it. And then in subsequent talks with Lee Trevino, he said I could do brain surgery with my wedge. That is if you want to play golf and shoot low numbers, you've got to be a wizard with those short clubs, especially the sand wedge and pitching wedge and the shots around the green. But the sand wedge is a fantastic club, but you must make sure that you have the correct bounce for what you're trying to get done. I love the Cleveland wedges. I love the Titleist Vokey wedges. They seem to be whoever is doing the design seems to be a good player and understands what they should be like, especially in the bounce area. Can you?
It's been discussed before, but there's still it's confusing. What do you mean by bounce?
Well, bounce. There's the flange on the golf club. Well, if you take a club and turn it over, you'll see that a high bounce club, the flange kind of sticks out a little bit. It's higher.
I'm sorry, flange is the part that touches the ground?
Yes.
Okay.
So the idea of the flange is that it penetrates the sand a little bit. It goes into the sand a little bit, and that's what puts sand on the face of the club, and then you hit the ball, and the ball comes out soft. So way back when, I've got an old wizard wedge by Johnny Revolta that's like an anvil, very heavy, big flange on it. But it was primarily for the sand. But you also want a sand wedge that you can use off the turf. And if you have too much bounce on it, and you're hitting off a tight lie, you're going to hit some nifty little skull shots that you don't want. I've always believed that I can get the ball out of the bunker, and I don't need the high loft of the bounce. I don't need a big bounce on it. I can use a lower bounce, and I just open the thing up, and I feel like I want to slide the club under the ball a little bit more. I don't stick it in the sand so much and explode it out. And I think in today's world, you see more of the sliders where they slide the ball out a little bit. You don't see the too much chunk and run as you did way back when. So I like my sand wedge to be a little bit more utility for me, where I can use it in the fairways, use it off of a tight lie, and use it in the bunker. So that little piece that comes down, it's kind of a V shape. That's what it looks like when you're looking at the bounce. And the more V the shape is, the bigger the bounce.
Are you saying
hard to say?
Yeah, no. It's hard to explain without holding a club up.
Yeah, it's hard to explain with words. You have to see it.
Yeah. Are you saying that it's easier to get the ball to stop when you slide it under when you're in a bunker, or when you explode it up?
Well, to get the ball to stop, it has to do with speed. The more speed you can generate and hit and do it properly, the more spin you put on the ball, the more you stop the ball.
Backspin.
A lot of people like to hit it so that it releases a little bit. Not too many guys are trying to carry it to the hole and make it stop. That's the conditions have to be perfect for that in the sand. But you watch the guys today; they have that blade really open with the sand shot, and they just come from out to in on it, and slide that baby underneath. And Ventura used to. When he was alive and I got to play a little golf with him, I used to watch him, and that was his thing. He said, feel as if there's a tee under the ball and try to clip that tee. And I hit a lot of skull shots for a while until I got that feeling where I could slide the thing underneath.
You said perfect conditions when your ball's in the sand and under perfect conditions. For me, I'm a public course guy, right? I don't play the country club that has fresh sand brought in every 6 months. And so lots of times, especially after a harsh winter like we had, the sand, the bunkers are now hardly sand. They're almost mud or have turned into hard dirt. What are perfect conditions?
Well, then you have to get a little, when you have a really hard pan, you got to be steeper on the shot. You got to literally make your own sand by hitting straight down into it and digging a little bit. That that would be a condition where you're stuck with that, because if you try to pinch it off of a hard pan, you run the risk of the club bouncing because of the bounce on the club, and it bounces into the ball. The club head bounces into the ball and you hit it in the middle of the ball and skull it. So in that case, you got to get steeper with it. The problem in muni places and places like that, it not only is sometimes there's way too much sand and it's really soft because it's not a silica sand. It's like a blow sand that you get in the desert, and that's really much more difficult to get it out and make it do what you want it to do. In that case, you're just trying to get it out and hoping for the best. But if you look at the tour, the bunkers are perfect, and they have kind of what they call a silica sand, and it's a tight sand in a way. You can slide the club under, but it's not arduous where you can't get it through. That real heavy sand is very difficult.
And when you look at the tour, you'll notice that even if they hit wayward shots, they don't lose balls. That's because there's people standing there watching where they land. I mean, it would be so much nicer and we'd play so much better if we didn't have to go searching for a ball that we saw land and, okay, it's in the rough over there, and you can't find it. Anyway, that's my own issue.
Very seldom you see a lost ball on tour because there's so many people watching.
Right.
It happens occasionally, but very seldom. And plus, I think the average guy's errant shot is a little bit more errant than the pros. But you're right. That's a great thing. You never really lose a ball.
Yeah. Is there a difference of the way bunkers are prepared or the type of sand that are in bunkers in the fairway versus the greenside bunkers?
No, they're generally, if they're using a silica sand, they're using it on all the bunkers. Typically, muni courses, they're using a heavier sand, so it stays in there a little bit more. But they don't use a different sand for fairways than they do greenside generally.
Okay, good. Need to know that. How many wedges do you carry in your bag?
A pitching wedge and sand wedge.
So do you carry 14 clubs?
Sure.
Then
I just load up.
Yeah, where do you load up?
I load up with the rescue clubs.
How many do you carry?
Now, let me see. I've got a driver, 3-wood, 5-wood, 3, 4, 5 rescue, then 6, 7, 8, 9 pitching wedge, sand wedge, and putter.
And what are your? That's interesting because so I carry driver, 4-wood, then a 3 hybrid, 4 hybrid, and my irons are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Pitch, gap, sand, lob.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more on the wedge side because to me it's, I'll hit my 4-wood. My driver I can hit. I average like 240 or between 240 and 250. But I can hit my 4-wood about 210 to 220, and then my 3 hybrid I hit 200, and then 185. So to me, that I feel like I've got all that covered, that distance, because I'm not going to go beyond that distance.
Like, each individual is different.
Sure.
I tried the gap wedge for a while, but again, it was confusing for me. First of all, unless you really play a lot and you're very skilled, the hardest part is distance control. If I've got a 91-yard shot, it's really hard for me to hit it 91 yards. I remember the funny story. The caddy said, Hogan said to the caddy, "How far is it?" He says, "It's 96 or 97." He says, "Which one is it?" Because that's how immaculate Hogan was about playing the game. I mean, he really could hit it within yards. But the average person, even the guys on tour, as you can see, they're either short or long most of the time.
So what's the difference in your distance between your pitching wedge and your sand wedge on a full swing?
I had my set set up so that my sand wedge is a little on the strong side, so it's a little closer to my pitching wedge. So there's no need for the gap. My sand wedge is a 54 degree. A lot of them are 56s and so forth.
Right.
So I don't find it. I've never had a problem, and I played for years before there was gap wedges and 60-degree wedges, and I did just fine. But manufacturers put that seed in your head so you can buy more product. You got to have a gap wedge. You got to have a 60-degree. I mean, and I think Mickelson has a 64-degree or something like that. I'd be afraid I was going to hit myself in the head with the thing. So. I just don't see a need for it.
Well, I have like a 35-yard difference between my pitching wedge and my sand wedge. And to me, that's like, why would I want a 35-yard gap there when it could be so many different shots for me as I'm getting, for my approach shot? I can deal with a 25-yard distance between my long ones. But on the short shots,
but you maybe your pitching wedge is a little strong and your sand wedge is a little weak. But you should be able to take a pitching wedge out and hit it 50, 60, 70, 80. Now, you should be able to hit it all those distances. So, I mean, for heaven's sakes, they didn't have lob wedges or rescue. I mean, what am I trying to say? Gap wedges for or gap clubs for a long time, and people were able to, that's called shot making, and that gets back to these clubs. The great players like Hogan, he would hit every club in the bag during a practice round 25 times, and he'd hit them different trajectories, left to right, right to left, high and low, and he could stand out there and with his whole set of clubs and hit a green, say out about 150, 160, with every club in the bag, including the driver. So he had the ability to speed it up or slow it down and still make a legitimate swing and hit the ball flush. That's what's missing today. Everything is, I hit a 7-iron 170, and that's all I hit it. Well, you should be able to hit it 120 or 110. If a person would take the clubs that they have and practice with them and use them for different distances, you'd be surprised. They could literally eliminate some of the clubs in their bag and still be able to play without any problem.
You're making a basic assumption that we practice.
Well,
I can't tell you how many people complain about the fact that they want to be more consistent, but they never practice. Right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
oh man, if I was only more consistent. Well, what are you doing to work on that? I go out and play golf.
When the best in the world, that's all they do for a living is play golf.
The key words there. The key words, for a living. We all have to do other things.
That's why. I mean, you can't expect to play at the level that they play and not hit the ball number of balls that they hit. I mean, it's just not possible. It's just a comfort thing. It's a mental thing, really. When you've hit a lot of balls, you're storing that in your subconscious mind, and the better you hit it, the better picture you have in your subconscious mind. Average guy, when he goes to play, he doesn't know what's going to happen that day. probably within a 20-stroke period. Where the touring pro, if he has a bad day, he's going to shoot 72 or 3 or 4. The average guy who maybe averages, let's just say 85, he doesn't know if it's going to be 120, 95, or maybe 80, and that's because the golf clubs aren't his friends because he hasn't hung out with them enough.
That's one of the things I talk about when someone asks, if I play for money. It's like, no, I'm competing against too many things that I can't bring money into the equation as well, because then I'll really freak out. And one of the things that I feel like I'm competing against is my golf clubs. I mean, there's the terrain, there's the weather, there's my head, and then a different club for every shot, different length, and so I'm competing against those too.
Yeah, I mean, it's. The game is, we manifest a lot of things like the thing when I have a young lady that I teach. I'm not going to use her name, but she constantly talks to me about the pressure, and that's something that we create because of doubt. There's no such thing as pressure. I mean, the golf ball doesn't know anything about pressure. The golf clubs don't know anything about pressure. The player is the one that is putting a value on the shot. That doesn't need to be put on it. I got a 150-yard shot to a green. I've got a club I select, and if I make a decent swing, I should be able to put it on that green. But now, if I don't put it on that green, I may lose the tournament, or if I hit in that bunker or hit in the water. Well, these are all perceptions, and that's what, as a coach, that's what I'm always trying to explain to my players, that there is no such thing as pressure. When the flag goes up, it's no different. The golf course didn't change. The ball didn't change. The only thing that changes is your mindset. See, so in trying to be a good golfer, you have to work on that aspect too. And of course, the more that you practice and the more good shots that you see, the better chance you have of having a good image as you stand up to that ball, getting ready to strike it to a target.